She cut of the finances of her husband who left her for his mistress. The waiter's voice wasn't loud, but in the hush of the exclusive restaurant, it sounded like a gunshot. "I'm sorry, sir. The card has been declined." Ethan Caldwell froze. His hand, still extended with the platinum credit card, the symbol of his status, his success, and his ego, trembled slightly. Sitting across from him, Clara, the woman he had just left his wife for, lowered her wine glass. Her eyes didn't hold sympathy, they held a flicker of annoyance. "Try it again," Ethan snapped, his voice tight. "There's a mistake. That card has no limit." "I have tried it 3 times, Mr. Caldwell," the waiter replied, his tone polite but firm. "The bank has flagged it, reported as lost or stolen. The account is frozen." Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. He pulled out another card. Declined. A third. Declined. For years, Ethan believed he was the architect of his own fortune. He walked with the swagger of a man who paid the bills, the man who called the shots. He had forgotten one crucial detail: the foundation beneath his feet, the capital that fueled his investments, and the security that allowed him to take risks. It all belonged to Zara. The quiet, artistic wife he had just discarded like yesterday's news. Stop and ask yourself, have you ever poured your soul into someone, building them up, supporting their dreams, and funding their lifestyle, only for them to treat you as an option rather than a priority? We often believe that love conquers all, but we forget that in many marriages, money is the silent language of power. Ethan Caldwell is about to learn a brutal lesson. He thought he was walking away into a new life of freedom and passion. He didn't realize he was walking off a cliff. Zara didn't just pack a suitcase and cry. She didn't scream. She simply made a phone call and turned off the tap. But when a man defined by his wealth is suddenly stripped of every dollar, who does he become? Can a relationship built on deceit survive when the luxury ends? And most importantly, can a woman who gave everything finally find the strength to take it all back? Welcome to Love Tales with Mr. Bennett. We are a community that believes in the power of stories to teach, heal, and inspire. If you are new here, or if you've been watching without joining our family, please take a moment right now to click that subscribe button. Turn on notifications so you never miss a chapter. Today, we bring you a story of betrayal, justice, and the ultimate reclaiming of power. This is the story of a husband who forgot where his blessings came from, and a wife who reminded him. Let's begin. In the sprawling metropolis, a city of steel and glass where ambition was the currency of choice, Ethan Caldwell walked like a king. He was a man who seemed to have been carved from success itself. Tailored suits that cost more than most people's cars, a corner office overlooking the skyline, and a smile that could disarm the toughest boardroom opponent. To the outside world, Ethan was the provider. He was the heavy lifter. When he walked into charity galas with his wife Zara on his arm, people whispered about what a perfect pair they were. Ethan, the corporate shark, and Zara, the gentle, ethereal artist. But appearances are often a meticulously painted veil designed to hide the cracks in the wall. Zara Williams, now Zara Caldwell, was not just an artist. She was the sole heiress to the Williams estate, a lineage of quiet, generational wealth. However, Zara never wore her money. She didn't flaunt diamonds or drive flashy cars. She preferred the smell of turpentine and oil paint to the scent of fresh banknotes. When she met Ethan 5 years ago, she had been captivated by his drive. He was hungry, sharp, and seemingly devoted. She had opened her world to him. More importantly, she had opened her accounts. They had merged their lives completely. Zara, trusting and deeply in love, had allowed Ethan to manage their joint finances. She wanted him to feel like the head of the household, to feed his need for traditional masculinity. She signed the papers, linked the accounts, and went back to her studio, trusting him implicitly. It was a mistake that would cost her years of her life. As the years rolled by, the vibrant colors of their marriage began to turn gray. It didn't happen overnight. It was a slow erosion, like water wearing down a stone. It started with the absences. Working late became Ethan's mantra. He would come home long after Zara had eaten dinner alone, smelling of stale office air and expensive scotch. When she tried to show him her latest painting, a chaotic blend of blues and deep violets expressing her loneliness, he would barely glance at it. "That's nice, honey," he would say, his eyes glued to his phone. "Did you call the cleaner? My grey suit isn't pressed." Zara would swallow the lump in her throat and nod. She convinced herself that this was just the cost of success. Ethan was building a future for them. He was stressed. He needed support, not complaints. So, she made herself smaller. She took up less space in the house, quieter in her movements, hoping that if she was low maintenance enough, he would love her again. But while Zara was shrinking, Ethan was expanding his horizons elsewhere. Enter Clara. Clara Vance was everything Zara was not. Where Zara was soft, Clara was sharp angles and high gloss. She was a junior executive at Ethan's firm, a woman who viewed relationships as strategic mergers. She had watched Ethan for months. She saw the expensive watch, the custom shoes, the way he commanded the room. She smelled the money on him, and she wanted a seat at the table. Their affair didn't begin with love, it began with validation. Clara fed Ethan's ego. She listened to his complaints about his boring wife who just wanted to paint all day. She laughed at his jokes. She made him feel like the most powerful man in the city. "You deserve someone who understands your world, Ethan," Clara whispered one evening, her hand lingering on his arm after a meeting. "Someone who runs at your speed." Ethan, intoxicated by her flattery, began to believe her. He started rewriting history in his head. In his mind, he wasn't the man who married into wealth. He was the self-made genius who was being dragged down by a dead weight. The deception became a lifestyle. Ethan became a master of the double life. He had a second phone. He had credit cards that he thought were hidden. He took Clara to lunches at places he knew Zara would never visit. He bought Clara gifts, diamond earrings, designer handbags, using the dividends from the very stocks Zara's grandfather had purchased decades ago. The irony was thick enough to choke on. Ethan was using his wife's inheritance to woo his mistress. Family, pause for a second. I want to ask you a question. Have you ever had a gut feeling that something was wrong in a relationship, but you ignored it because you were afraid of the truth? We call it intuition, and it is rarely wrong. If you've ever felt that sting of suspicion, drop a yes in the comments below. Let's support each other. Back to Zara. For a long time, Zara lived in a state of willful blindness, but the universe has a way of exposing the truth. It doesn't always happen with a bang sometimes. It happens with a piece of paper. It was a Tuesday morning. The rain was lashing against the windows of their penthouse, creating a rhythmic drumming sound that echoed the anxiety in Zara's chest. She was looking for an old sketch pad in Ethan's home office. She rarely went in there. He liked his privacy. As she moved a stack of files on his desk, a sleek black envelope slid out and fell to the floor. It wasn't addressed to the house. It was addressed to a P.O. box that Zara didn't recognize, but it had somehow ended up in Ethan's briefcase. Curiosity is a dangerous thing. Zara picked it up. It was a statement for a credit card she didn't know existed. She opened it. Her eyes scanned the lines, her breath catching in her throat. The Ritz-Carlton Weekend Suite, Tiffany and Company, diamond tennis bracelet, Le Bernardin, dinner for two. The dates didn't match any of their anniversaries. The dinner dates matched nights when Ethan had claimed to be at mandatory board retreats. Zara felt a coldness spread through her veins, a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. She sat down in Ethan's leather chair, the leather creaking under her weight. She pulled up their main joint account on his computer. He had left it logged in. She began to dig. She wasn't an accountant, but the numbers painted a clear picture. Large transfers of cash to this hidden credit card. Withdrawals at times when Ethan was supposedly sleeping beside her. And then she found the email. It was open in a minimized tab. An email thread between Ethan and Clara. Subject, our future. Ethan, just a little longer, babe. I'm talking to the lawyers next week. I need to figure out how to keep the penthouse. Once I cut her loose, it's just you and me. She's suffocating me. I can't stand another night of her silence. Clara, make it fast. I'm tired of sharing you. The screen blurred. Zara didn't cry. Not yet. The shock was too absolute. It was as if someone had reached into her chest and turned off the switch to her heart. The man she had adored. The man she had elevated. The man she had loved since that first day in the gallery. He didn't just fall out of love. He despised her. He viewed her as an obstacle. Suffocating. She whispered the word to the empty room. She stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the grey city. She saw her reflection in the glass. She looked tired. She looked small. But deep inside something ignited. It was a tiny spark, fueled by the dry tinder of betrayal. Ethan thought she was weak. He thought she was just the artist wife, head in the clouds, oblivious to the hard realities of the world. He thought he held all the cards because he wore the suit and went to the office. He had forgotten who signed the checks. Zara turned away from the window. She didn't pack a bag. She didn't scream or throw the computer against the wall. She walked out of the office and picked up her phone. She dialed a number she hadn't called in years, the private wealth manager who handled the Williams family trust. "Hello, Mr. Henderson," Zara said. Her voice was steady, terrifyingly calm. "I need to make some immediate changes to the portfolio, specifically regarding the joint access privileges and the supplementary cards held by Mr. Caldwell." "Of course, Mrs. Caldwell." "What kind of changes?" "Block everything," Zara said. "Freeze the joint accounts, cancel the platinum cards, revoke his power of attorney, and redirect all dividend payouts to a new, secure account in my name only. Ethan will be unable to access funds, ma'am. Is that your intention?" "Yes," Zara replied. "He wants to live a separate life. I'm simply helping him start it." She hung up the phone. That evening, Ethan came home early. He was humming a tune, adjusting his tie in the hallway mirror. He didn't know that the ground beneath him had already crumbled. He didn't know that while he was planning his exit, Zara had already locked the door. He walked into the living room. Zara was sitting on the sofa, her hands folded in her lap. She wasn't painting. "Hey," Ethan said, breezing past her toward the kitchen. "I'm going to pack a bag. Mandatory conference in D.C. leaving tonight. I'll be gone for a few days." The lie rolled off his tongue with practiced ease. "You're not going to D.C., Ethan," Zara said. Her voice stopped him in his tracks. He turned, a frown creasing his forehead. "Excuse me. You're going to Clara's," Zara stated. It wasn't a question. Ethan froze. The color drained from his face, but he quickly recovered, putting on his mask of indignation. "What are you talking about? Who is Clara?" "You've been smelling too much paint thinner, Zara." "I saw the emails, Ethan. I saw the credit card statements." Zara stood up. She didn't yell. She looked at him with a gaze so piercing it made him flinch. "I know everything." Ethan stared at her for a long moment. Then the mask fell completely. His face twisted into a sneer, the face of the man he really was. "Fine," he spat. "You know. So what? I was going to tell you anyway. I'm done, Zara. I'm done with the boredom. I'm done with pretending you're interesting. I've found someone who actually challenges me. Someone who is on my level." "On your level," Zara repeated quietly. "Yes. Clara is a winner. We're going to build an empire. And frankly, I'm doing you a favor. You can stay here with your little paintings." He laughed, a cruel, hollow sound. "I'll have my lawyers send over the papers. I'm taking the penthouse, by the way. You can afford another place." He turned his back on her and marched into the bedroom. He threw clothes into a suitcase, grabbing his suits, his watches, his expensive shoes. Zara stood in the doorway, watching him. "You're making a mistake, Ethan," she said softly. "The only mistake I made was marrying a bore," he shot back, zipping up the bag. "I'm leaving, Zara. Don't wait up." He brushed past her, his shoulder knocking into hers, and stormed out the front door. The slam echoed through the apartment, signaling the end of their marriage. Ethan walked to the elevator, pressing the button impatiently. He felt a rush of adrenaline. He was free. He was going to Clara. He had his career, his reputation, and his freedom. He pulled out his phone and texted Clara. "It's done. I'm coming over. Let's celebrate. Dinner at Le Monde. On me." He smiled as the elevator doors opened. He had no idea that the me he was referring to no longer existed. He had no idea that the plastic card in his pocket was now nothing more than a scrap of useless plastic. He walked out into the cool night air, flagged down a taxi, and headed toward his new life. But justice was already waiting for him at the restaurant. The air inside the taxi felt electric to Ethan. He leaned back against the worn leather seat, watching the city lights blur past the window. He felt a sense of liberation he hadn't known in years. To him, Zara was a ghost of his past, a soft, muted memory of a life that had become too small for his ambitions. He arrived at Clara's luxury apartment complex. He didn't just walk, he strutted. He was the hero of his own story, the man who had finally chosen passion over duty. When Clara opened the door, dressed in a sleek black cocktail dress that shimmered under the hallway lights, she looked at his suitcase and smirked. "You actually did it," she whispered, pulling him inside. "I told you I would," Ethan said, dropping his bags. "I'm done living in a museum. I want to live in the real world." "With you." They spent the next hour toasting to their empire. Ethan spoke loudly about his plans to dominate the firm, about the vacations they would take to the Maldives, and about the penthouse he would soon secure for them. Clara listened, her eyes bright with the reflection of the life she thought she was securing. To Clara, Ethan was a golden ticket. She didn't see a man. She saw a portfolio. "Let's go to Le Monde," Ethan suggested, checking his watch. "I want the best table. I want to celebrate our first night of freedom properly." The restaurant was a cathedral of excess. High ceilings, waiters in white gloves, and a wine list that read like a history book. Ethan loved the way the staff bowed when he entered. He had been a regular here for years, usually on Zara's dime, though he had convinced himself it was his own hard-earned bonuses. They ordered the finest champagne. They ate oysters and Wagyu beef. Ethan was in top form, regaling Clara with stories of his brilliance. He felt invincible. Then the check arrived. It sat in a silver folder, a quiet reminder of the evening's cost. Ethan didn't even look at the total. He simply slid his platinum card into the folder and handed it back to the waiter with a dismissive nod. "Thank you, David," Ethan said, using the waiter's name to show his familiarity with the establishment. He turned back to Clara, reaching across the table to take her hand. "This is just the beginning, Clara. Tomorrow I'll call the realtor. We'll find a place that suits us. No more dusty art studios, no more silence." A few minutes passed. The waiter returned, but his gait was different. He wasn't bowing. He held the silver folder with a strange, rigid tension. "Mr. Caldwell?" the waiter whispered, leaning in close. "Yes," Ethan smiled. "I'm afraid there is an issue with the card." It was declined. Ethan's smile didn't disappear. It just froze, like a mask. "That's impossible. Run it again. Your machine must be having a glitch." "I've tried it several times, sir," the waiter said, his voice carrying just a bit further than Ethan would have liked. At the next table, a prominent city lawyer paused his conversation, glancing over. "The system is returning a contact bank error. It says the account has been restricted." Ethan felt a prickle of sweat at his hairline. "Fine. Use this one." He pulled out his corporate card. A minute later, the waiter was back. "This one is also declined, sir. It appears the authorized user status has been revoked." Clara's hand, which had been resting warmly in Ethan's, slowly pulled away. Her eyes narrowed. "Ethan, what's going on?" "Nothing, babe. It's just—" "Zara must be playing games," Ethan hissed, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and embarrassment. He pulled out a third card, a personal account he used for his golf club fees. Declined. The silence at the table became heavy. The surrounding diners were now openly watching the great Ethan Caldwell struggle to pay for a dinner he had bragged about. The waiter stood there, expectant. "Is there another way you'd like to pay, Mr. Caldwell?" the waiter asked, his tone now devoid of its earlier warmth. "Perhaps the lady has a card." Ethan looked at Clara. Clara looked at the bill. It was over $1,200. I don't carry that kind of balance on my personal card, Ethan," Clara said, her voice turning cold. "You said this was on you. It is on me," Ethan shouted, a bit too loud. He reached for his phone to call the bank, but as he hit the app, a notification popped up, access denied. User credentials invalid. He tried to call Zara. It went straight to voicemail. In that moment, the reality of his situation began to sink in. Zara hadn't just changed the locks on the apartment. She had changed the locks on his entire life. She hadn't left him a single cent of the money he had used to lure Clara away. Ethan had to endure the ultimate humiliation, giving the restaurant his expensive watch as collateral until he could sort out the bank error. As they walked out of the restaurant, the air felt colder. The swagger was gone. Ethan looked like a man who had been caught in a lie he couldn't talk his way out of. "It's just a temporary glitch," Ethan said, as they waited for a cab. "Zara's being vindictive. I'll have my lawyer handle it in the morning. She can't do this. It's half mine." Clara didn't look at him. She was looking at her phone. "You told me you managed the finances, Ethan. You told me you were the one who built the wealth." "I did. I made the investments." "With whose money?" Clara asked. Her voice was sharp, clinical. She was a woman who did math for a living, and the numbers weren't adding up in Ethan's favor. "Family, let's talk about this. There is a difference between a man who makes money and a man who manages someone else's money and calls it his own." Ethan forgot that he was a steward, not the owner. Have you ever seen someone get too big for their boots, only to have the rug pulled out from under them? Tell me about a time you saw instant karma in the comments. We love reading your insights. The next few days were a descent into a special kind of hell for Ethan. He went to the office on Monday morning, ready to throw his weight around and get his corporate accounts restored. But when he tried to swish his key card at the executive elevator, it beeped red. He tried again. Red, a security guard, a man Ethan had walked past for 3 years without ever learning his name, stepped forward. "Mr. Caldwell?" "Yes, Jim. My card is acting up. Can you let me up?" "I'm sorry, sir. I have orders. You're to be escorted to the HR office on the first floor. Your personal belongings from your desk have already been boxed up." Ethan felt like the floor had turned into liquid. "What? On what grounds? I'm a senior VP. The firm received a notification regarding the misuse of company funds for personal retreats that weren't authorized," the guard said, his face a mask of professional indifference. "And since the primary investor in the firm's current expansion project, the Williams Trust, has withdrawn their support citing a conflict of interest with your leadership, the board decided to let you go." Ethan stood in the lobby, surrounded by people in suits, holding a cardboard box that contained a stapler, a framed photo of himself at a golf tournament, and a half-empty bottle of cologne. He wasn't a king. He wasn't even a prince. He was an unemployed man with a frozen bank account. He retreated to Clara's apartment, but the welcome had curdled. Clara wasn't the doting, ego-stroking mistress anymore. She was a woman who saw a sinking ship and was looking for the nearest lifeboat. "You lost the job?" she asked, looking at the box in his arms. "It's a setback," Ethan insisted, pacing the small living room. "I'll sue them. I'll sue Zara for defamation. I'll get everything back." "With what lawyer, Ethan?" Clara asked, sitting on her designer sofa. "Lawyers want retainers. Retainers require cash. You don't have enough money right now to pay for a bus pass, let alone a top-tier litigator." "I thought you loved me for me," Ethan said, the words feeling pathetic even as they left his mouth. Clara stood up. She walked over to him and straightened his tie, but there was no affection in the gesture. It was a finality. "Ethan, I loved the man you presented yourself to be. I loved the man who could buy me the world. But that man was a character played by someone who was borrowing his wife's script. Without the money, you're just loud. And honestly, you're a liability to my career now. Are you breaking up with me?" "I'm downsizing my distractions," Clara said. "I think it's best if you find somewhere else to stay. My lease doesn't allow for guests who can't contribute to the bills." Ethan was kicked out of the mistress's bed before the sheets had even cooled. He found himself standing on the sidewalk with his suitcase and his cardboard box. He had no home, no job, and no access to the funds he had spent years pretending were his. He checked his remaining personal cash, $62. He walked to a nearby park and sat on a bench. For the first time in his life, the silence wasn't suffocating, it was terrifying. He looked at his hands. They were clean, soft hands, hands that hadn't done a day of real labor in a decade. He thought about Zara. He thought about the way she used to look at him with such pure, unadulterated belief. She hadn't loved him for the suits or the office. She had loved him when he was a nobody, and he had traded that gold for glitter. Meanwhile, across the city, Zara was undergoing a transformation of her own. The first few nights had been the hardest. The apartment she had shared with Ethan felt too large, the silence ringing in her ears like a physical pain. She had spent hours sitting in her studio, staring at a blank canvas. She felt a deep sense of shame. Shame for being fooled. Shame for letting a man use her family's legacy to fund his betrayal. But then the shame turned into a cold, focused clarity. She didn't go to social events. She didn't call her friends to complain. Instead, she picked up a palette knife. She didn't use the soft pastels she usually favored. She reached for the deep crimsons, the jagged blacks, and the shocking electric whites. She began to paint the betrayal. She painted the feeling of the floor falling away. She painted the face of a man who looked like a saint but moved like a thief. Each stroke was a cathartic release. She wasn't just making art, she was reclaiming her soul. She realized that for 5 years she had been painting what she thought he would like. She had been a secondary character in her own life. Now she was the protagonist. She called an old friend who ran a prestigious gallery in the meatpacking district. "I have a new collection," Zara said. "It's different. It's raw." "Zara, you haven't shown in years," her friend replied. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," Zara said. "I want to call the show The Price of Silence." As the weeks turned into months, Zara's name began to circulate in the art world again, not as a socialite, but as a force of nature. Her work was visceral. People stood in front of her canvases and cried because they felt the weight of their own hidden heartbreaks reflected in her brushwork. She was no longer the quiet artist. She was a woman who had found her voice through the very fire that was meant to consume her. And Ethan was watching from the shadows, learning that when you cut someone else's heart out, you're the one who ends up bleeding. The transition from a penthouse to a cramped $16 a night motel room was a psychological blow that Ethan wasn't prepared for. The room smelled of industrial cleaner and old cigarette smoke. The walls were thin enough that he could hear the muffled arguments of the couple next door and the rhythmic hum of the vending machine in the hallway. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, the springs groaning under his weight. He opened his wallet. Aside from a few loose coins and a gym membership card he could no longer use, there was nothing. No credit cards, no safety net. For the first week, he stayed in bed, paralyzed by a mixture of shock and ego. He kept waiting for the phone to ring, for Zara to call and apologize, for the bank to say it was all a big misunderstanding, or for a headhunter to offer him $1 million salary. But the phone remained silent. Hunger eventually forced him out. By the second week, Ethan Caldwell, the man who used to complain if his steak wasn't the perfect shade of pink, was standing in line at a local diner, applying for a job as a dishwasher. "Experience?" the manager asked, a burly man with a grease-stained apron. Ethan looked at his soft, manicured hands. I have a degree in business administration. I was a senior VP at—" "I didn't ask for a resume, pal," the manager interrupted. "I asked if you can scrub a pot without breaking it. Can you stand on your feet for 8 hours? Because that's the job." "I can do it," Ethan said, his voice barely a whisper. His first shift was a descent into a reality he had spent a lifetime avoiding. The heat in the kitchen was oppressive. The steam from the industrial dishwasher felt like it was melting his skin. By the end of the night, his expensive leather shoes were ruined by soapy water, and his back ached with a dull, throbbing intensity. As he walked back to his motel in the rain, he passed a digital billboard. His heart skipped a beat. There, glowing against the dark sky, was a massive image of one of Zara's new paintings. It was a haunting image of a golden cage with the door ripped off its hinges. In bold, elegant lettering, it read, "Zara Williams, The Price of Silence. Opening this Friday." He stood there, drenched, staring at her name. She had dropped his last name. She was no longer Zara Caldwell. She was just herself. And she was everywhere. Family, let's take a moment. Have you ever noticed that when you finally let go of a toxic situation, your blessings seem to double? It's as if the universe was waiting for you to clear the space. If you believe that everything happens for a reason, type "I am ready" in the comments. And if you haven't yet, join the family by hitting that subscribe button. While Ethan was scrubbing burnt remnants of food off plates, Zara was standing in the center of a whirlwind. Her studio had become a sanctuary of productivity. She no longer painted in the corners of her life. Her life revolved around the canvas. The Price of Silence collection was unlike anything the city had seen. It wasn't just art. It was an autobiography written in color and texture. The opening night of her show was the event of the season. The gallery was packed with critics, collectors, and socialites. Zara wore a simple, elegant black dress. No flashy jewelry, no pretension. She looked radiant, not because of what she wore, but because of the fire burning in her eyes. "Zara, this work it's visceral," a renowned critic said, gesturing to a piece titled "The Architect of Lies." It depicted a man made of glass, hollow and transparent, standing over a foundation of sand. "I stopped trying to paint what people wanted to see," Zara replied, calmly. "I started painting what I needed to survive." She was no longer the woman who checked with her husband before making a decision. She was a woman who owned her time, her talent, and her wealth. During the auction, 3 of her major pieces sold for record-breaking amounts. The money, which she didn't even need, was donated to a foundation for women starting over after domestic and financial abuse. She was reclaiming the narrative. She wasn't the scorned wife. She was the victor. Back at the diner, Ethan's life continued its downward spiral. Clara had blocked his number. His friends from the golf club didn't return his calls. He realized, with a sickening clarity, that people hadn't liked him. They had liked the access he provided. Without the Williams fortune behind him, he was invisible. One night, after a particularly grueling shift, Ethan found himself sitting on a park bench near the gallery where Zara's show was held. He watched from across the street as the elite of the city filtered out, laughing and discussing the brilliance of the artist. He saw Zara walk out. She was flanked by her gallery director and a group of admirers. She looked different. Her posture was straight, her smile was genuine, and she carried herself with a quiet authority that he had never bothered to notice when they were married. He wanted to run over to her. He wanted to beg for a second chance. He wanted to tell her that he was sorry, but as he looked down at his cracked red hands and his stained clothes, he realized he had no right. He hadn't just lost his money, he had lost his dignity. He had treated her like a bank account, and in return, he had been liquidated. He stayed in the shadows, watching her get into a car and disappear into the night. That night, Ethan didn't go back to the motel immediately. He walked for hours, thinking about every lie he had told, every moment he had chosen Clara over Zara, and every time he had taken credit for successes that weren't his. He realized that his rock bottom wasn't the lack of money. It was the realization that he was a man who had built a life on a foundation of air. He was a hollow man. For the first time, he didn't feel angry at Zara. He felt a profound, heavy sense of regret. He saw, with painful clarity, the woman he had thrown away. Not for a better version, but for a mirror that only reflected his own vanity. Ethan returned to his motel room and sat in the dark. He didn't reach for a drink. He didn't try to call anyone. He just sat with his shame. The next morning, he didn't go to the diner. He went to a local library and used the public computer to look up the address of a non-profit organization that helped with career counseling for the formerly homeless and displaced. He didn't want a shortcut anymore. He didn't want a merger. He wanted to find out if there was any part of Ethan Caldwell that was real. 6 months. In the world of high finance and fast-moving city life, 6 months is a blink of an eye. But for Ethan Caldwell, it was a lifetime of penance. The man who once lived for the spotlight had retreated into the quiet, rhythmic anonymity of the working class. He had moved out of the motel and into a small shared apartment in a neighborhood where nobody knew his name or cared about his former titles. He no longer wore Italian silk. He wore sturdy cotton and work boots. His hands, once soft and pampered, were now calloused and scarred, a physical map of the labor he performed every day. Ethan had moved from the diner to a construction site. It was backbreaking work, hauling materials and following orders from men 10 years younger than him. At first, his ego had screamed. He had wanted to tell them he used to run a firm, that he used to make their yearly salary in a month. But every time he opened his mouth to brag, he remembered the look on Zara's face the night he left. He remembered the silence of the restaurant when his card was declined, and so he kept his mouth shut. He learned to listen. He learned that respect wasn't something you bought with a platinum card. It was something you earned by showing up and doing the work. Every paycheck he received was small, but for the first time in his life, it was entirely his. He wasn't living on the Williams legacy. He wasn't skimming off the top. He began a ritual. Every month, after he paid his rent and bought his groceries, he would set aside a small amount of money. He would put it in an envelope. He knew it was a drop in the ocean compared to what he had taken or spent behind Zara's back, but it wasn't about the amount. It was about the principle. He was paying back his soul. While Ethan was rebuilding his character from the ground up, Zara was redefining what it meant to be a woman of influence. Her success wasn't a fluke. The Price of Silence show had launched her into a new stratosphere of the art world. She was no longer just a painter. She was an icon of resilience. She had used her newfound platform to create a series of workshops for young artists, providing them with the space and the resources she had once felt were hers only by luck. She moved out of the penthouse. It held too many ghosts, too much of the suffocation Ethan had accused her of. She bought a converted warehouse in a vibrant part of the city. The bottom floor was her studio, open, airy, and filled with light. The top floor was her home. It was a space that belonged only to her. Zara had also begun to date, though cautiously. She met men who were successful, men who were kind, and men who were brilliant. But she found herself looking for something deeper than professional accolades. She was looking for truth. She often thought of Ethan, not with the searing rage that had defined her first few months of freedom, but with a quiet, reflective sadness. She realized that she hadn't just lost a husband. She had lost the version of herself that believed in fairy tales. And in a strange way, she was grateful to him. He had broken her heart, but in the process, he had broken the cage she didn't even know she was in. Family. Let's get real for a moment. Is it possible to truly forgive someone who betrayed you? Or does the scar always itch when it rains? Forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. If you've ever had to forgive someone for your own peace of mind, type peace in the comments. And remember, we are growing together. Hit that subscribe button to stay part of the family. The day Ethan decided to reach out wasn't a dramatic one. There were no grand gestures, no flowers, and no desperate phone calls. He sat down at his small kitchen table and pulled out a piece of plain stationery. He didn't use his old executive letterhead. He just used a pen and his own thoughts. He wrote a letter. It took him 3 days, and 24 drafts to get it right. He didn't ask for her back. He didn't ask for money. He didn't even ask for a meeting. He simply said, "Zara, I am not writing this to ask for your forgiveness, because I haven't earned it. I'm writing to tell you that I finally understand. I understand that I didn't just take your money. I tried to take your spirit to feed my own vanity. I am working now, really working. For the first time, I know what $1 is worth, and I know what a promise is worth. I have enclosed the first of many payments to start repaying the funds I misused. It isn't much, but it is honest. I don't expect a reply. I just needed you to know that I see you now. I see the woman you always were, and I see the man I failed to be." The letter. He went back to work. 2 weeks later, he returned home to find a small, cream-colored envelope in his mailbox. His heart hammered against his ribs as he recognized the elegant, flowing script of his name. He opened it with trembling fingers. "Ethan, your letter was unexpected. I don't want the money. Give it to the foundation I've started. They can do more with it than I can. But I appreciate the words. If you are sincere about the change you've made, I would be willing to sit down for coffee, not as husband and wife, but as two people who used to know each other." The meeting took place at a small, unassuming cafe near the park. Ethan arrived early. He sat at a corner table, his heart a chaotic mess of nerves. When the door opened and Zara walked in, the world seemed to slow down. She wasn't the woman he remembered. She was more vibrant, more grounded. She moved with a confidence that felt like a physical force. She sat down across from him. She looked at his hands, the calluses, the dirt under the nails that wouldn't quite come out, the wedding ring finger that was now bare and scarred. "You look different, Ethan," she said softly. "I feel different," he replied. He didn't try to charm her. He didn't use his salesman voice. He just looked at her. "I'm sorry, Zara, for all of it. Not just the affair, but the way I treated our life like a transaction." They talked for 3 hours. They didn't talk about us. They talked about the work he was doing. They talked about her art. They talked about the city. Ethan listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to make the conversation about himself. For the first time in their entire relationship, he was actually present. As they stood up to leave, Zara looked at him with a gaze that was no longer cold, but it wasn't warm yet either. It was observant. "I see the effort, Ethan," she said. "But words are easy. Life is hard. Keep doing the work." "I will," he promised. As he watched her walk away, Ethan realized that for the first time in months he could breathe. He hadn't won her back, and he might never, but he had found a path. The long road home wasn't about returning to the penthouse. It was about returning to the truth. The following months were a period of quiet rebuilding. Ethan and Zara continued to meet, but they didn't rush into the shadows of their past. They treated their new connection like a fragile glass sculpture, beautiful, but easily shattered if handled with the old, careless hands of their marriage. Ethan continued his grueling work in construction. He had been promoted to a site foreman, a position that required leadership but kept him firmly on the ground. He lived simply, finding joy in the small things he used to overlook: a good cup of coffee, the feeling of physical exhaustion after a productive day, and the honest conversations he now shared with Zara. Zara, meanwhile, was at the height of her career. She had become a fixture in the international art scene, but she remained grounded. She visited Ethan's job sites sometimes, bringing him lunch and sitting on a stack of lumber just to talk. She was seeing a man she'd never known, a man who didn't need to be the provider to feel like a person. But the universe rarely lets a transformation go untested. The test arrived in the form of a perfume Zara recognized instantly, a sharp, expensive scent that cut through the air of the gallery during one of her private showings. Clara Vance walked in. She didn't look as polished as she once had. The firm had let her go shortly after Ethan's departure, realizing she was more interested in social climbing than the company's bottom line. She had moved to a smaller firm, and her eyes held a desperate hunger. She ignored Zara and walked straight toward the man she saw standing in the corner. Ethan, who had come to help Zara move some of the heavier crates. Ethan was in his work clothes, a stark contrast to the tuxedo-clad men in the room. "Ethan?" Clara's voice was a practiced purr. "I almost didn't recognize you. You've filled out. The rugged look suits you." Ethan turned. He didn't flinch, and he didn't smile. He looked at Clara as if she were a stranger from a dream he had long since forgotten. "Hello, Clara. I heard about what happened," she said, stepping closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I heard Zara took everything. It was cruel, really. I've missed you, Ethan. I realized I was too hard on you. I'm starting a new venture, a consulting firm. I need someone with your talents, someone who knows how to navigate the high-stakes world." She reached out to touch his arm, her eyes flickering toward Zara, who was watching from a distance. "We could have it all back, Ethan. The office, the status, the fun. I have the backers. I just need you." Ethan looked down at Clara's hand on his sleeve, a sleeve stained with the dust of a hard day's work. He felt no surge of ego. He felt no desire for the life she was offering. To him, Clara wasn't a woman. She was a ghost of the vanity that had almost destroyed him. "You're mistaken, Clara," Ethan said, his voice loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. Zara didn't take anything that wasn't hers. She gave me the greatest gift I've ever received. She stopped the lies. And as for your venture, I'm not interested. I've finally found a job where I don't have to look in the mirror and wonder who I'm cheating today. Clara's face contorted. The mask of beauty slipped, revealing the bitterness underneath. You're a fool, Ethan. You're a laborer. You're a nobody. You'll be back begging for a seat at the table soon enough. I have a table, Ethan replied calmly, and the people sitting at it actually care about me. Clara stormed out, her heels clicking angrily against the polished floor. Ethan turned toward Zara. He didn't look for praise. He just gave her a small, tired nod. Zara walked over to him. She didn't say anything at first. She simply took his hand, the calloused, honest hand, and squeezed it. "You passed," she whispered. "I wasn't trying to pass a test," Ethan said. "I just wanted her to go away so I could finish helping you with these crates. Family, we have reached the end of this journey. This story isn't just about a wife cutting off a husband's money. It's about what happens when we stop funding our own destruction. If this story moved you, if it taught you something about self-worth and the power of starting over, please like, share, and comment below. Tell us the biggest lesson you're taking away from Zara and Ethan today. And if you haven't joined the Love Tales with Mr. Bennett family yet, click that subscribe button. Your support allows us to keep telling stories that matter. Zara and Ethan did not go back to the way things were. That marriage was dead, and they both acknowledged it. Instead, they built something entirely new. They moved into a house that they chose together, not a penthouse built on status, but a home built on comfort. They kept their finances separate, a boundary Zara insisted upon, and Ethan respected with all his heart. He continued his work in construction, eventually starting his own small contracting firm that focused on quality and integrity. Zara's art continued to flourish. Her most famous piece, a massive mural in the heart of the city, depicted two figures standing in a storm, holding a single, glowing thread between them. It was titled The Redemption of the Truth. They learned that love isn't a state of being, it's a series of choices. It's the choice to be honest when it's hard. It's the choice to support each other's dreams without losing your own. As the sun set over the city, Zara and Ethan sat on their porch, watching the world go by. They didn't need the flashy restaurants or the platinum cards. They had something far more valuable. They had the peace that comes from knowing exactly who you are and exactly who is standing beside you. Moral and life lessons. 1. Trust and communication. We learned that silence isn't peace. It's often just a place where secrets grow. Real love requires the courage to speak the truth, even when it hurts. 2. Self-discovery. Zara had to lose her marriage to find her voice. Sometimes the worst. Thing that happens to us is the very thing that sets us free. 3. Forgiveness. Ethan learned that forgiveness isn't a right, it's a grace. And Zara learned that forgiving someone doesn't mean letting them back into your life on their terms. It means letting go of the anger so you can move forward on yours. 4. Growth through challenges. A relationship is like a bone. When it breaks and heals properly, it can be even stronger at the point of the fracture. Thank you for being part of the Love Tales with Mr. Bennett family. We'll see you in the next story.